the crucial role of Laibach and the NSK for me is the shift from politics to art, or from politics to aesthetics, and the gradual realization that the aesthetic language is superior to political language and actually contains political language and not the other way around. And this started for me when I was a teenager and I was a political activist. I was into anarchist punk, the anarchist punk movement, and obviously living in Israel and finding out for the first time about Laibach, which was, I guess, the two focal crucial points was seeing a live video of Laibach on stage and buying the Opus Dei album and taking out the inner sleeve and seeing this massive swastika made out of 4 axes tied together. So obviously for me it was a challenge, but I think because I started with punk and I got into politics because of punk, and punk is deeply rooted in aesthetics, I was able to instinctively, I mean, my initial reaction was, oh my God, those Nazis are amazing. And, so I had the instinct which allowed me, because thanks to punk, it allowed me to say to myself, years before I could formulate it intellectually, if this moves me aesthetically, I have to engage with it. I have to walk with it, and I have to find a solution to incorporate something which is supposedly completely opposite to my political beliefs. Obviously, throughout the years, I understood the complexity of what Laibach and the NSK are doing. However, I try to expand on that, because even the original statements, the early statements of Laibach and the NSK, and of course the very famous way Slavoj Zizek defined the strategy of overidentification, of being more stately than the state, of being more fascist than the fascists, and in that sense creating some kind of a subversive message. I think it's very important for me to stress that it goes even beyond that specific statement by Zizek, because it's important for me to state that over-identification is not ironic, and it's not, like Hararis said, it's not just a conceptual trick which makes use of certain aesthetics. For me, it's almost the other way around. It's not the stance of an activist, a moralist stance of somebody looking from the outside in, supposedly immune from the mobilizing power of totalitarian aesthetics. And that is part of the reason that, for example, that at some stage I stopped using the phrase totalitarian or fascistic aesthetics, and I started to use the phrase monumental aesthetics, because I think the monumental aesthetics are part of the human imagination since the dawn of time, and only at a certain point in the 20th century they were taken over, so to speak, by totalitarian regimes, and of course the NSK touched upon that. And so the main points that I would like to expand briefly that go beyond Zizek's phrasing of over-identification. One is the fact that prior to the Second World War, the political left, either totalitarian or democratic, I mean even the anarchists in the Spanish Civil War, had no problem whatsoever with using monumental aesthetics. it became a taboo for very good reasons after the Second World War, but I firmly believe that, I'm inspired by the NSK and Laibach in stating that this taboo must be broken and that monumental aesthetics belongs to everyone. The second and probably the most important point for me is, again, not placing yourself in some kind of moral higher ground as if you're outside those sinister mobilizing forces, because again, like when I was 17 and I thought those Nazis looked great, and it's important for me to stress the way, in my opinion, NSK and Laibach use monumental aesthetics because there is a core in their work which, no matter how subversive or critical or socially challenging they may be, at the core there is a love for those aesthetics and the willingness and the boldness to immerse oneself completely in this love. And I want to use, I'm almost done, just to use an example of how I see this experience of being completely immersed in aesthetics, which again I consider the superior language, which contains all other languages, including the political language. In 2005, I was living in Berlin, and I went to a Killing Joke concert. And Killing Joke are very powerful live performers, almost as good as Laibach, not as good as Laibach, but almost as good. And I was so captivated by the experience and so elated and so immersed in the experience and in the totality of the experience that after the show, I felt I can't just go home. So I went to a bar where the bartender was a friend. And I'm not a heavy drinker, but I drank a lot because the bartender gave me drinks free. And anyway, I drank and drank and drank, and I went home, and I did all the usual stuff that a person does when they are preparing to go to sleep, brushing my teeth, whatever, and drinking some, I don't know. But because I was so drunk and because I was so immersed in the experience of seeing Killing Joke, I did all those normal activities crawling on all fours. Just around my house, just crawling around my house, completely normal. And there was nothing unusual about it. And the reason I'm bringing up this example is to demonstrate how necessary it is to be immersed in the aesthetics to the total extent that what in looking from the outside, or what if you would analyze it intellectually, or if anyone was just witnessing my actions that night, would consider ridiculous, offensive, taboo, forbidden, stupid, was actually the result of this absolute immersion. And this is what I take with me as a lesson. And this is why I work constantly with the NSK and Laibach in mind, because I consider if you take one of the earliest statements by Laibach, that every art is subject to political manipulation, except that which makes use of that manipulation. For me, it means that Laibach and NSK acknowledge the superiority of the aesthetic over the political, and the only way with which an artist can allow themselves to eventually have political, social significance is by allowing oneself to be totally immersed in the artistic and aesthetic language, because that language is infinite, it's open-ended, it's the opposite of the instrumentalized binary language of politics, and it always, in that sense, it touches the unknown, and therefore allows for infinite potential, as opposed to approaching art from either the political slash activist or, of course, commercial outlooks, which for me, when you come from this way, it's like you take the top of the iceberg, which is the tip of the iceberg, which is the political language, and try to pretend that you are actually the base of the iceberg, which is the artistic language. And I think the NSK and Laibach are crucial in turning this upside-down pyramid back to its firm base, and that is the only way forward in confronting all the political challenges that you mentioned, for example. I think, to conclude, I think activists and art dealers are ignorant about the language of art and about the infinity of the language of art, or even worse, they hate art. They instrumentalize art. Art dealers use it as a commodity, and activists use it as a pedagogic aid. And when they use it as a pedagogic aid, they erase the absolute monumental magnitude of the aesthetic language in full. Sorry for ranting.